You ever heard of the domino effect in marketing or messaging? But the idea is that it's the cumulative effect of doing, executing, posting, sharing, pitching that happens over and over again until that final one tipping point when you reach whatever magical moment that is and you don't know what it's going to be. You'll say something, do something, post something, publish something, share something, pitch something, and finally, that first domino will tip over.
We've been working really hard. And what we're trying to do is not something really highfalutin. We're trying to get back to the basics.
That's the domino effect in marketing. But there's a perversion of it that bleeds its way into the way we talk about in our messaging and how we do our marketing. And I call it the Domino Syndrome.
Marketing's about values. This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world. And we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us.
And it's one of the worst things we can do. It kills every good effort a marketer makes, every message that we want to put out there to have the kind of effect that gets us, wins us, support customers.
It's not to talk about MIPS and megahertz. It's not to talk about why we're better than Windows.
Yes, it's the worst thing that we can do. So we better find out what it is so we can avoid it and figure out what to do instead. So tap the like button and we'll take a look. Hi, I'm James Callahan, and this is The Do-Over Show. And one of the things that we work on is getting our messaging right. And one of the ways we don't get our messaging right is when we turn that cumulative effect of all the good work we do, we turn it into a syndrome, something that actually poisons all the good things we're trying to do. This happens in marketing and messaging all the time, and it's something that we have to avoid. Let me explain.
Apple spends a fortune on advertising. You'd never know it.
But what happens when we pervert that is that the domino effect in marketing becomes this syndrome where we try to manipulate either to jump ahead in line, let's go viral instead of doing all the hard work, or we try to prove to people, to argue them into being our customers, buying our product or service or supporting us. Yeah, the syndrome is when we pervert something that is really good and healthy, the domino effect, into something that is just a display of our ego or insecurity. And it happens more often than not when we are operationally transparent. Yeah, when we need to explain to people how the sausage is made and how our wonderful competencies, because we know exactly what the problem is, how to solve it. Here's our logistical chain. Here are the good people. Here are qualifications. Did you know I went to this school? It'll be all of those things, all those defensive, self-defensive, coping things that we use, and then we start to push them out to people. And we expect to win over their affections, their hearts, their minds, by all of a sudden being better than anybody else in the world, as though that's attractive. The domino syndrome is defensive. It's self-justifying. It's selfish. And it's usually characterized by the use of this phrase, you need to understand. In marketing and in messaging, our customer, our audience, doesn't need to understand a damn thing. That's on us. We're the ones who are supposed to be sensitive, empathetic, to know what their problems are, what they aspire to, what they hope to be, or what they see themselves as being today, and to be there for them so that their problems are solved, so that their goals, their hopes are met, and so that their frustrations are eased. Finally, they're relieved. Now, here's where you see the domino syndrome at work, and that is when you get those long-winded monologues, those explanations. Let me tell you about the 38 good things about this car, or let me tell you about the wonderful things we do. It only has 50 moving parts to it. And then we go through all those things, thinking that we're going to argue somebody into submission, into buying, into giving. And if your pitch, your proposal, your marketing script, your newsletter is just crammed full of all of those operational making of the sausage details, thinking that that's going to prove to people how competent you are and how much confidence they can have in you, then you suffer from the domino syndrome. For example, if you have a change the world message that itemizes all the 50 steps, moving parts and pieces involved in moving from the person you're talking to the change the world outcome that you're promising, let me give you an example. I worked with a nonprofit that if you give $1, a kid in rural Central America gets an egg. That's it. That's simple. But there were at least 50 different steps. People, logistical moves, planning efforts, other organizations, contributors, partner organizations, everybody involved in me giving $1 and a kid getting one egg. Now, what does that do? Well, it tries to prove that they really know how to solve a problem. Yes, but the effect is that when you give a kid an egg, they're healthier, they live longer, their grades go up, their families are healthy, their immune system improves. Yes, everything is great. And for somebody who wants to change a kid's life in Central America, $1 giving an egg is a great way to do it. So why put all the 50 steps between the person giving the dollar and the kid getting the egg? Because you think you're important. Because you think you have to be the one who gets credit for being so smart to solve this problem, instead of the poor kid who needs the egg and the person who's willing or generous enough to give a simple dollar to do it. Now, nonprofits and small businesses routinely do this because they believe it indicates, it shows, proves competency. But that competency actually is a display of insecurity. The insecurity that you have to justify your existence and be able to prove to people that while there are 50 people doing exactly what it is you're doing, you have to prove that you're better than everybody else. Yeah, it's selfish, it's narcissistic. Narcissism in this kind of messaging and marketing comes through like this. Everybody else does it wrong. We're the only ones who do it right. Like us, dislike them. That's narcissism in the Domino Syndrome. And this competency tied to insecurity is deadly. It's poisoning in our marketing and messaging. The alternative is confidence. Confidence that displays an ability to be able to say, here's what we're after. Oh, look at your mission statement, your vision, your values. Is it about you? Of course it is. That's all they're about. We obsess about ourselves instead of obsessing about our customer or our customer service or the end beneficiary or the person who is necessary to make something possible, who's going to give us their money in exchange for a tote bag and good feelings. Yeah, we obsess about ourselves when they're obsessing about a problem that we're supposed to be solving for them. And this kind of confidence sounds like one of my favorite words, unapologetic. I love that word. To be unapologetic in marketing and messaging is transformative. To be unapologetic means that you're willing to put yourself out there, regardless of how others in your space do it. You're able to put yourself out there. You don't care what the boss thinks about your marketing. You don't care what your team or the operations team or somebody in the back office said, but we don't do it that way. We don't call it that. No. We put ourselves out there without apology, without defensiveness, and we offer ourselves as the solution to somebody's problems, to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. That is your primary goal. Everything else is making sausage. And it probably shows up in your elevator pitch. Think about it. You have an elevator pitch. Most people, used to be the cool thing to do. You have an elevator pitch, 30 seconds to tell them all about you. Oh yes, your elevator pitch was all about you. It's ridiculous, but here's the alternative. You want a solution? The elevator pitch affirms the person you're talking to. You probably see the world this way. You want to solve this problem. You're tired. You're frustrated with just moving things around or putting Band-Aids on things. Does that sound right? Does that sound like you? You see, that leading with that kind of characterization, that affirmation, that reciprocity that happens when we actually talk about someone else's values instead of our own. And then we turn it into a question where we get them to share, to vulnerably say, yeah, that is me. Or I think I want to hear more. Now, we still have competency in our pocket. So when somebody comes up with a question, there are two ways of asking a question. One is because they really do want to know more or they don't understand something, but they think they understand something. So they'll ask, wait a minute, how do you do this? I think that's a difficulty. The other reason you have the competency of explanation ready is when somebody gives an objection, when somebody's just offering up a question because they don't want to trust you. And here's the thing. You can't win somebody's trust. You can't force it. It's a gift that they give. And you're never going to argue somebody into being a supporter or a champion or a participant or a customer. It's never going to work. So at that point, you want to have the come to Jesus moment. You want to have the honesty talk. You want to have the, can we talk about this moment? So that you do have the response, but you're also willing to have the talk with them and say, it sounds like you don't think that this is a good solution or this isn't for you. Now, most of us are so insecure that we avoid having the talk with people thinking that we're just going to drive them away. They were never yours in the first place. And to avoid having the talk merely shows how insecure our marketing and messaging has become. And that competency that you have in your back pocket usually is a 1, 2, 3 question type of response. That is, you do this, this happens, and here's the result, either for you or for the person you want to help. And then you turn it around in a question. 1, 2, 3, and does that sound like something that works for you? Yeah, it's that simple. You don't give them the 50 steps. You give them a 1, 2, 3, and then you put it back on them. You make them at that point say, am I going to take that trustful step towards you? And I'm going to say, yeah, it does. And then at that point, then you have somebody that actually wants to engage with you. You're not manipulating them. You're not avoiding them out of insecurity. You're being confident, and you no longer suffer from the domino syndrome. So what are you going to do to avoid the domino syndrome and get back to the domino effect in your marketing and messaging? Please leave some ideas in the comments below, because we all need to hear more about this. And thanks for being part of the Do-Over Show. Please, could you tap the like button? And while you're down there, how about you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode? I'm so glad you found me, and I found you. Thanks.